Jon, for taking up time to do this. As we have discussed in the past, I personally have attended a lot of webinars, as well as I've seen some podcasts where leaders are talking about use of AI in L&D. AI is anyways the buzzword today. Everyone's talking about it. And given your interest as well as a lot of your work in that area, which is not just AI, but focusing on everything that's happening around use of technology in learning, I thought bringing this up with you probably would be the best. And before I jump into my questions, just for people who don't know you, started working in back in 99. So you have been around for a really long time. And you have been associated with L&D for most of your career. I think for the last 10 years, you have been with EY, and currently you are their global learning innovation leader. I'll pause here if I misrepresented anything or anything that you would like to add to your introduction.
No, that's spot on. Yeah, so I've had my whole career in learning development, mostly focusing on the sort of the ed tech space and how that's evolved. And I started with more of a shift or more of a focus on consulting, running my own business, and then moved into the big professional services world. So I worked with PwC for a while, and we did a number of sort of HR-led transformations, and then moved into EY to work on their internal global L&D team, which is where you and I met. So we've got some background together.
Let me jump into the first question. And as I said, everyone's talking about AI. You are focusing on innovation. So, and it's not just your current role, but in general, what you see in the industry. So if you could talk about how is AI transforming the world of learning, more importantly, should we be scared?
Yes, we get that question a lot. And interesting, we mentioned e-learning as the sort of major revolution in terms of corporate learning that happened in the early 2000s. And, I think at that point, everyone was thinking, well, what's the future of the L&D department if, e-learning could be developed, to replace the classroom? The reality is that didn't happen. There's always going to be a need for classroom-based learning. And that sort of interaction where you're both bringing together collaboration, communication, and celebration, and then the AI revolution is the next one. So that's happening right now. We're in it now, and I would argue that the future of L&D is AI rather than AI is enabling L&D to change. So it's quite a big shift, and what we're seeing within EY, but other organizations, is there's two aspects to it. So there's the need to rapidly upskill our employees on AI. So what that's going to mean for your role, for your industry, your sector, etc. And then also internally for L&D functions, how you leverage AI for every aspect of it. Going from the very kind of early use cases, particularly of generative AI, to create learning outlines and do that kind of upfront instructional design work to sort of help augment what you're already doing, through to something that we are working on right now is dynamically generating content based on large data sets, large language models, and being able to personalize that to your own needs. Because now we have the data, now we have the capability of knitting that data together effectively to drive a truly personalized approach, and then coupling that with coaching experiences that are truly scalable and data that you trust as well. A lot of people get very excited about the potential of AI and how it's going to change our industry, but we often forget the need for improved data and quality data. You and I used to work together on that quite a lot, and the mantra was no data is better than bad data. I'm sure you remember that, but that still holds true. So one of the things that I think we are recognizing is that, particularly in a very large organization, making sure that you have the right data sources, they are properly integrated, and it's of quality, makes a huge difference to the outputs that AI can deliver.
Perfect. And while you were talking about how it's changing the learning world and how outlines can be created and all that, it reminded me of something. This is pre-COVID, which seems like a different era altogether. And back then I was with EY, and we had done a course from Carnegie Mellon. And towards the end of the course, I asked the person who was heading it was Professor Ken, and I asked him, do you see instructional design becoming obsolete in another 5, 7 years? And I think this was 2018, and he said, I don't think 5, 7 years, but probably around 10 years, you would be struggling or you will be challenged. And I think his prediction is coming true. We are somehow seeing that a lot of what we used to do as instructional designers back then probably may not completely be taken over. And I don't want to influence your thoughts on that, but I think definitely some of it is getting supported through the use of AI. So interesting times ahead. And yeah, thankfully it didn't come sooner than that. At least I'm taken care of. But yeah, for instructional designers who are around, I think they need to start thinking how they are going to adopt it, not just fight against it. Um, one of the pieces that you spoke about was how organizations are using it and the importance of having good data. For any organization, specifically in the learning space, attempting to incorporate or bring in AI, and let's say talking about how can we use AI to personalize learning, what are some of the things that are critical for them to keep in mind or consider when they are doing this?
Yes, it's good. It's a good question. I mean, the personalization aspect is wholly dependent on the data that you have available. And what we are working on is a big cleanup of our catalog data. So we've got our LMS, so our system of record. That's not going to go away. I don't see that disappearing anytime soon. We might not use it to surface content, more of a database in the future, but we still need the data to be of high quality and relevant in that to be able to personalize. And we're also looking at how do we get more granular in terms of our catalog. So beyond just the large form e-learning video, virtual learning content into transcript level data analysis. And that will drive the ability for generative AI to create content on the fly and then personalize it. So if it has down to the kind of learning objective level, metadata that's able to pull that out and then build out summaries, build out dynamic content, sort of video content, etc. We're even looking at, can we use that to dynamically generate assessments to assess your skill level? So there's a lot of potential there, but you've got to have that basis of solid data. And in a large organization, there's a lot of work to do to clean that up. And until you do that, the output is going to be poorer quality, and therefore the trust in the ability of the AI to deliver what the promise is, which is this sort of truly personalized experience, is going to be eroded. So this is where there's a balance of how fast do you go pushing this new stuff out and creating these new experiences alongside improving the data that's enabling it. So one of the things that we are discussing is the balance between formal learning content that sits in our LMS. We've got multiple external providers that are integrated into the LMS as well, versus informal content that might sit on someone's OneDrive, SharePoint sites, etc. Might be in a knowledge database that isn't owned by L&D, and how we bring those together and validate the trust in that data. So you have an inherent level of trust on internal content or internal material, and then probably that diminishes as you get further outside the organization. And how do you show that and then bring that together to really drive a well-designed, well-structured, and well-personalized pathway through content. So it's not just let's use AI and move forward as fast as we can. It's at the same time, let's work thoughtfully around how we're going to manage that experience and make sure that the quality of what's being delivered is still consistent, because that's where I see L&D becoming a different department in the organization. It's less about designing, developing content. It's more about curating and being more of a performance consultant to the business. So understanding the business needs and being able to define the data and the inputs that are required for that, to then push that into the AI machine, which will then personalize it. So it's quite a change from the traditional sort of business partnering model, together with instructional design, graphic design, etc., and the sort of machine that just churns to generate content. I think that's in the next sort of 2, 3, 4 years is going to disappear, and we're going to move more into the performance consulting and performance coaching world, where we are orchestrating what's happening with AI to manage the experience more effectively.
A few pieces that you spoke about definitely created a lot of interest in my mind. One, of course, is the fact that if you don't have trustworthy data, and specifically if you're looking at organizational learning, right, it can put the organization at risk. Even one error can lead to a much bigger risk than you may have imagined. So I think that's a key point, that you need to use data which you think as an organization it's trustworthy. The other aspect that you spoke about is, and it will be super exciting from a learner's perspective, right? This will be true learning in the flow of work. We have been talking about learning in the flow of work for, I think, ages now, but this will be, if what you explained becomes a reality in 4 years or 3 years, it will be a sort of a dream. Probably 5 years back, we couldn't have even dreamt of it. And now it can become a reality where things can be, or a learning can get generated right in the flow of work. I get stuck somewhere and the system is able to create something for me and is able to support me. And the other piece that you spoke about, and probably that's where the next question is leading me to, is the fact that the traditional models of L&D may change. So business partnering passing on to D&D, passing on to something else. One, those models will change, but I think also the life cycle will reduce. I know typically if we are looking at an e-learning, it takes approximately 8 to 10 weeks for something to become live. And I think in today's day and age, in 8 to 10 weeks, probably the technology has changed completely. So the appetite for that kind of time frame isn't there anymore. So to my next question, so you have already hinted towards it. So the models are going to change, but do you also see that there will be certain roles which will, let's not say become obsolete, but may undergo transformation? L&D as a whole, but also certain roles within L&D?
Yes, and we've been talking about this in the L&D world for probably 20 years, of becoming more value add and more strategic. I think that's been a challenge because L&D has always sat in an enablement function, alongside finance, IT, procurements, etc., where it hasn't necessarily been as a real sort of strategic driver. And that's where I think AI has the capability to shift that. And L&D will become much more of a connection maker between parts of the business. So linking the strategy into sales and revenue opportunities, and driving that through with dynamically built learning content that cuts down that time to market speed And with the AI potential that is there now, that's going to take that 8 to 10 weeks down to potentially almost seconds. Where it is building content on the fly. We've seen models from organizations where they're generating video content based on large data sets dynamically, and there's no delay. The challenge with that, as we've already sort of mentioned, is the trust in its ability to generate quality content that is relevant to the individual, but also specific for the organization. For us, it's what's the kind of EY methodology, the EY framework that we are working within, and maintain the consistency. And that's where I see the role of the instructional designer, the graphic designer, the program managers, etc., that are currently in that machine of building content that takes 8 to 16 weeks to develop, shifting the focus into managing the orchestration of AI and agents that are then generating the content, and ensuring that there's the right framework around them to enable a relevant experience and to enable the quality. So that's quite a big shift. Alongside where we've currently got business partnering, that will move more into performance support. So again, enabling AI to deliver the experience at scale, because we're never going to have enough humans to be able to manage the scale of an organization of 400,000 people to provide that sort of one-to-one type experience, and really kind of maintain the quality of that. So this is where I see business partnering shifting more into a sort of performance support role, understanding the strategy of the business and the business unit that they're working with, and then translating that into how the AI models are supporting the experience.
A couple of examples that come to mind, something that I was exploring. One is we used to create those branching simulations, right? And those were even more complex than the regular e-learning.
Yeah.
I think one used to take approximately 4 months to deliver. And I was exploring a tool where I gave the tool a certain scenario, and it gave me the option: do you want to write the scenario on your own, or do you want me to write it for you? So I chose you write it for me, and I think within 3 to 5 minutes, it had created a branch storyboard for me. And of course, I did not review it, but I picked the same storyboard and I tried a different tool to convert that into e-learning some more time. And a functional e-learning was available for me, where I could, depending on my decisions or choices, the paths were changing. Uh, what stood out for me was the output quality. So it wasn't clearly humans, but these were animated videos.
Mm-hmm.
The animations were really good, and the audio was almost as if a human has recorded it. Um, Back in those days when machine recorded audio used to sound like, I don't know where it has been recorded, to a point wherein it's very difficult to differentiate whether it's machine recorded or human recorded. So definitely, we have come a long way. The other piece that I haven't yet experimented in detail, but I have heard a lot about it, is coaching, where AI can come in as a coach, and for an organization, for example, of the size of 400,000, you cannot afford to have a coach for everyone. But with AI coming in, and if the coaching is successful, then you can open that up for a much larger audience. So absolutely, as I keep saying, exciting times ahead. I'll jump to my next question. You already spoke about how we can take it to scale. One of the pieces that I have been hearing about AI a lot, and even in 23, I remember one of the badges that I last worked on was around the ethics of using AI. What are some of the conversations that you are hearing, and how are people approaching the whole idea of the ethics in the AI world?
So there are two aspects to that. One we've already mentioned is the trust in the output, which is directly linked to the quality of the input and the management of the framework that it's operating in. And that's something that I think it's fair to say is still very much evolving. And we can't guarantee. We can put some frameworks and some guardrails around the way that AI operates, but we still can't completely guarantee the output, which for particularly regulated industries is a big challenge, and that does prevent us from using AI at everything. Particularly where we are bound by compliance requirements. So I still think there's a way to go there, but like anything new, the trust takes a while. It's a big change, and we'll get there. And the quality is improving all the time. So we are learning how to build these frameworks, how to, particularly in the agentic AI world, to sort of add in agents that are monitoring the quality and can go off and assess the output against a rubric or against a particular framework or even regulatory requirements. We work with the US a lot around their US CPE, and we're looking at agents that can then assess the output of AI generated content that makes sure that it's compliant to the NASBA US CPE requirements. There's some quite exciting areas that we can develop there, but it's still emerging. And then the second area that is related is data privacy. So you mentioned coaching. There are concerns in different parts of the world around how that's going to operate, and what data it has available to you, as being able to then review the outputs of the coaching and the role plays that we're developing right now, and use that to assess people's capabilities. And again, it's back to trust. So if you're having a coaching conversation with an AI about your performance, your career goals, where you want to head in the organization, how much of that should and could be exposed to leadership from a reporting and analytics perspective? How much should that be more just with your own AI coach, as a kind of confidential discussion? So there's those sort of ethical discussions that we haven't really cracked yet. We're starting small, we're starting carefully, and being very conscious around what data is exposed through those types of interactions with AI, and just trying to look at how then we scale it globally. As we operate in pretty much every country in the world, they all have their specific requirements around data privacy, and we have to respect that. So it is a challenge, but as I say, the quality of the data inputs and the quality of the AI and how we understand how AI operates is improving all the time. So we're getting there, and the more testing we can do, the better the output becomes.
Yeah, thankfully for now, coaching as a field is still open for humans. I hope it stays like that for some time. But with respect to trust and the confidentiality part of it, especially for organizations as big as EY or others in a similar area where they are present in multiple geographies and countries. Are these organizations also looking at what's happening beyond the organization, for example, the political climate and those kind of things? Are the external factors also influencing the decisions that are happening within the organization?
Yeah, very much so. So the example of that recently with the EU AI Act, where there are specific requirements on organizations of how they interact and use AI. That's becoming a bit of a template for other parts of the world to be able to use that. And then as it is a technology, the usual discussions on where the data resides, who has access to that data, The GDPR sort of equivalent rules still apply as well. But yeah, it's very much an evolving space. One that there's new regulations coming out all the time. It's definitely hard to keep up. It's a very rapidly changing world.
Absolutely. From an organizational perspective, trying to bring you to a practitioner's perspective, given that you have seen so much, and I'm sure you and your team would have experimented with a lot of platforms and tools. Anything that stood out for you, which you felt, okay, this was really nice, something that a practitioner can take away from?
In terms of actual tools that are out there right now, so there are a few, and there are some that obviously are paid for and require contracts and the kind of the commercial side of things, but some are free and readily available. So on the free ones, there's tools like Adobe Express that have an AI component, generating images. They're moving into the video world as well. It's a great tool for sort of creating graphic content. There's one called Genially, which is a gamification engine that's free as well, and it's great sort of rapid content generation. Has a strong AI element to it. iSpring is another tool that's been out there for a while. They've also incorporated Gen AI into it in terms of the storyboarding and the structure of the content. And there's a tool that's relatively new called Composer with a Z, Compozer, and that has the ability to customize the templates, which is quite useful for a free tool, and then output to SCORM. Whether we like it or not, SCORM is still there. It's still required for a lot of organizations. So that's a good one. And then on the sort of the more commercial side, there's a couple of organizations that are really starting to sort of push the envelope with the use of AI. So Arist is one. They're a relatively new startup, and they have a platform that uses kind of nudge-based learning, and they've got a generative AI content development element of that, where you can upload a learning outline, a PowerPoint document, any sort of document into the system. It will then break that down into learning objectives, structures, modules within that, and then generate content to it. And then the output of that can be pushed through into Slack, WhatsApp, or Teams. So it has that kind of in the flow of work, nudging type approach to learning, which from some of their recent studies, the impact is huge. They've been using it for helping organizations get to grips with rolling out things like Copilot and other AI tools, and rapid upskilling. So that's a good one. And one other organization is called UpLimit, which is worth taking a look at. So they are growing in the market, and they have this concept around cohort-based learning. Again, lots of AI across the product in terms of generating the content, but also then how it interacts with the community. So it will nudge you as you go through learning modules. It has an effective rules-based engine, which will then send out updates on how you're doing, using data around your progress, where you might have stalled, if you didn't have time to catch up or run the modules for that week. It will then provide you a summary and give you hints and tips on how to catch up. That's a really neat tool. And then it's also worth talking sort of outside of the pure L&D world around the skills market, which has just exploded over the last couple of years, of how organizations are looking at skills assessment. So there's organizations like Rejig and Workera that are providing AI-generated assessments for skills, not just tech skills, but softer skills as well, for sort of professional leadership and development skills, and being able to then use that to build out your skills profile in platforms like Eightfold or Drop or even Success Factors. So there's a lot of these skills-based AI-driven organizations that are popping up that can help with some of the problems we've got within HR and talent to scale our operations and deliver, to large groups of people.
That answer essentially tells me that I have to do a lot to catch up. A lot of those names I haven't even heard of, so I'm going to do some Google search right after this and go through it. But two things that definitely become very clear. One, I think AI is sort of targeting the common areas of concern that professionals have told us as an L&D, that because of which they are not able to learn. One, they don't have time to learn. So, and the second one is the relevance side of it, that they don't necessarily find all learning to be relevant. And I think both those things will get directly addressed through the induction of AI into L&D practices. Or as you say, most likely as we move forward, it will become performance consulting rather than the traditional L&D. Given that there is so much that's changing, both within the L&D world, as well as, so two parts to this question. One is, how can an L&D leader inculcate this culture so that his or her team embraces this change? Because with any change of this nature, there is a lot of fear, skepticism that will I be even relevant tomorrow? So how can leaders encourage that people within the team embrace it? The second part is, as you rightly said, L&D most likely will evolve into more of a performance consulting team. How can L&D leaders make that change in image within their organization, that other stakeholders start looking at them differently?
It's not easy because, as we were discussing, we're coming from a perspective for most organizations of being a cost center rather than a value add. One of the things that there is huge potential for is using learning not just internally but externally with your clients, with your customers. Selling what you're doing internally, externally, and really kind of delivering the sort of outside in value. So that's a growth potential, I think, for L&D. And the other is to get to know the organization better. So spend more time, which is where AI can help you and reduce the amount of time that you're spending on content development, content curation, content management, all the administration behind it, which is typically 60 to 70% of the overhead of L&D, and then using AI to reduce that so you've got more time to be more strategic in those discussions with the business. And then the sort of third aspect, I would say, is having much more data-driven conversations. So being able to understand what the KPIs are for your organization and align what you're doing to those as much as possible. It's always been the holy grail of, you're looking at return on investment for learning. It's a very hard thing to do at scale, but it is possible to do it for individual programs. We've seen that over the years. You can get some very clear results that are very statistically significant in terms of the correlations on business impact. And that can be, particularly for sales-driven initiatives, that can be increased sales, so clear financial return. It can also be for the overall employee experience and retention, promotion, progression, performance, etc. And then for the organization, sort of seeing what impact that has on your brand reputation. And we've done a lot of that at EY. Being able to understand what value particular programs bring, and use that to really show the value that L&D brings to the total organization.
One of the pieces on that one of the pieces that I'm extremely proud of is even today, if I go to the EY website, the external website, there is mention of EY badges, how it contributes to each individual's growth and how they support aspirations. So you can essentially join in a certain team in a certain role, but you can pivot to a different one after picking skills once you're inside. So absolutely, and it I think it makes a huge difference to a brand because a lot of research says that today's generation is a lot more focused on is their employer giving them enough opportunities to learn and grow? So these kind of things definitely help. You spoke about, and I used to be very excited when you used to present those slides back in the day. I still remember a slide where you had presented how badges is impacting promotions, retention, and you spoke about that in terms of KPIs. So more around metrics of L&D because even today, a lot of organizations still talk about how many people went through training, how many hours of training.
Sure.
I don't know how those numbers are helping, probably cosmetic reasons, but what are some of the key metrics that you think organizations should be focusing on? And now that AI has come in, it's easier for them to focus on those.
Well, you mentioned the challenge of time to learn, being a real barrier to learning and progression and showing a return on learning. Traditionally, our approach to measurement in learning development was on consumption and evaluation. So, how many hours of learning, how many courses by which parts of the business, and then how well received were they, and the happy sheet, sort of 1 to 5, which they are sort of table stakes measures. We still need those. We need to be able to show how much learning we're delivering, and particularly where you've got like a COE, global function, the kind of proportion that the global function is delivering of that is an important metric. But to me, they're not the real kind of value metrics. And this is where this sort of concept of skills-based organization is shifting the thinking around how you evaluate the impact of talent and HR in general, not just L&D, to really showing a direct link from what you're doing as an HR intervention into business bottom line and the overall growth of your organization. So a recent example that we are working with our consulting team on is badges for grads. So as graduates come into the organization, they have a curriculum of learning that they need to complete to be ready for being on a client project. And until they've completed that, it's very kind of difficult to put them onto new clients. They're not quite ready yet. So one of the challenges we've had is being able to track and manage and oversee the consumption of that learning content. And we're just about to roll out a new badge that collects all of that together, gives them something physically that they can use to credentialize their abilities. And then more importantly, for our engagement managers to then take them off the bench and put them onto client projects with a level of trust. So we're back to the trust and validation that is the learning content they need to be ready, and they are kind of client ready. So they might have come from a very well-known organization, or university that's given them a great credential, but they don't have the EY methodology, the EY way of doing things, which means that there's a trepidation to put them on client projects. Whereas with this badge, we can clearly show that the time to competence or time to sort of client utilization is reduced significantly because they're incentivized, they get a badge, they're ready to go, and they're doing the learning that we want them to do. But also there's that rapid approach to getting them onto client projects and getting them engaged. So it has this sort of double effect of motivating them, but also growing the business much more rapidly.
That's a great example because that's an example where L&D is not just impacting business, but it's impacting people within the business. So the impact on businesses, engagement managers, and in all these years, we all know that they are always looking for people who are client ready. So
Yeah,
ensuring that they get more and more or a bigger pool to choose from is a great thing. The other piece is there is a credential that's associated with it, so their own trust on somebody being client ready increases. The recipient, that is the individual who's earning that credential, feels good, but more importantly, gets to work on a real world project probably faster than what it would have been otherwise. And the best part is that if two people earn this, then five others would get motivated that, okay, they got this badge and they got on a live project sooner, then why not get it? Which from an L&D team's perspective is great because traditionally we always hear, right, we have to chase people to come to training. People are not coming or registering for training, or they are not completing it. But this, once it reaches a certain point, can become a self-sustaining cycle where people come in, they get to hear, and they want to do it on their own.
exactly. And what we've seen is that, the graduates they're new to the organization, they're new to this sort of badges concept. So it builds their confidence in it and motivates them to then go on and get more badges, and look at more specializations. We've just launched a new series of badges in AI. We've seen a huge uptake on that, of people that not necessarily have that as part of their role. They're not part of our tech consulting business, but they're interested in the topic, and that we've seen a direct correlation between those that earn multiple badges and a significant increase in their promotion, their performance, their progression in the organization, and probably just as importantly, their mobility in the organization. So moving from one role to the next, one part of the business to the next, one country to the next. And that's one of the benefits of a large organization like ours.
Absolutely. And uh, a success story that I heard yesterday, I was talking to a person who was an executive assistant in EVA India. And this conversation was about something absolutely different. He and I have never interacted in the past, so he didn't know that I was part of the overall badges team. He spoke about the fact that he got an opportunity, or he got a recommendation from a stakeholder that he should do cybersecurity badge. He earned his cybersecurity bronze badge, and then he changed his role. He went to Dubai, and over there, as even though he didn't have any work experience, that badge helped him get into a managerial role in the cybersecurity team. So I was like, okay, this is making a huge difference to people's careers. And that's when I told him that because I knew that, okay, it's a positive story. I was like, okay, let me also connect myself to it. So I told him that I was part of the badges team. So but it was good to hear that it's making a difference to individual lives. So great. Probably the last two questions. One, I think we have spoken about quite in detail in terms of the importance of data analytics in evaluating effectiveness of learning interventions. Um, in terms of just the thought process of how data should be approached, do you see that there is a difference that's happening now? For example, with more opportunities opening up because AI is available, are learning leaders and learning teams approaching data in a different way?
Uh, I think not yet is the short answer. So what we're seeing is that there's great potential there, and we're starting to use AI to interpret data just to kind of speed up the way that we interpret large volumes of data. So, for example, if we're using more qualitative data, the surveys, our evaluation sheets that go out, or forms that go out after you complete a course, where you've got comments in there, sort of analyzing the sentiment of those comments. AI can really help drive that and be much more efficient and more effective in that. So that's an area where it's an obvious sort of benefit. But I think reframing our measurement approach is going to take some time, and that's partly because of this shift to skills, which is a relatively new world and requires very strong connection and collaboration across the organization, across the functions within talent. So, that skills is not owned purely by L&D or by talent acquisition. So there's a lot of close collaboration and alignment needed to reassess what our KPIs are around skills. So, it might be that a data point is your learner history or badge history that drives validation of your skills profile in some way, but also engagement history. So what projects have you've been on? What have you delivered? What was the feedback from that? And then we're increasingly talking about our sales pipeline. How does that feed into the skills that we need from a workforce planning perspective? And how does that then drive our decisions around how we grow the organization? Do we need to build more capability, buy it, or generate bots, use agents to support client work? So there's a whole kind of new world that is evolving. And at the moment, our focus from a skills perspective is around adoption, adoption of the skills profile, because you need a critical mass of people to update and maintain their skills profile. You also need a critical mass of data in terms of things like our opportunity marketplace, where you're matching people and their skills profile to opportunities or projects that are available across the organization. And then you need to kind of look at that more holistically from a workforce planning point of view. So, do we have the capacity and the capability in the organization to deliver against the pipeline of work that we've got coming? That's the really exciting capability, because that's the language of the business. It's not the language of HR. And that's where we've been trying to shift, for a long time, but not really had the data in a cohesive way to do it. And this is where AI is making this possible, because in the past, you could do that as a one-off. You could do an analysis of the impact of a learning intervention or a recruitment drive on a point in time. And that was great. It showed the value of that initiative, but it didn't show a very long-term strategic value. Whereas with AI now, we're being able to dynamically update taxonomies, dynamically update profiles using skills inference, dynamically generate content to support skills growth. And that whole system becomes much more fluid, and then we can assess that. So it's early days, and doing that, across 400,000 people is no mean feat. But that's the direction that we're heading in terms of being able to enable a more strategic vision of how talent operates.
Perfect. Jon, I've exhausted pretty much all the questions that I had listed for this conversation. This was wonderful for multiple reasons. One, of course, chatting with you has always been a pleasure. It just reminded me, it feels as if it's 2022. We are having a regular conversation. But also for people like me, it's sort of a wake-up call that we need to learn new skills if we want to continue to be relevant in the world today. And I'm sure, as I said before, the plan is to share it with a larger group of L&D professionals. They are going to take away a lot from this. So thanks a ton for doing this. Thanks a ton for taking your time and getting on this podcast.